Once data began going digital, authorities realized that there was a need to protect it. Thus, data privacy rules and regulations are created to address these cyber threats. Many organizations have one or more data privacy policies that they have to meet. Those in the United States, healthcare industry need to comply with HIPAA. Anyone collecting payment card data must worry about PCI-DSS compliance. By the end of 2024, about 75% of the population will have data protected by one or more privacy regulations. If that sounds a little bit overwhelming to you, don't worry. I'm going to be discussing that today on how you can easily keep up with data privacy regulations. Hello, I'm Michael Kinnett, CEO and founder of iTernal Networks. Every Friday at 1 p.m., I go live on our Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and my personal LinkedIn pages to discuss the latest in cybersecurity and technology news that might affect you and your business. At the end of our live session, I'll also be answering any questions from the audience. So if you have any questions, get them ready. I'll be covering them at the end. Before I get into our topic for the day, I do want to talk a little bit about the news. And there's a couple of articles that I want to talk about. First, yesterday, the American Bar Association started notifying their members that hackers had gained access to a legacy member system and was able to steal credentials for 1.46 million members. That's a lot of people. The passwords that they stole were hashed and salted, which is a method to protect the actual passwords and make them more secure to be stored. However, over time, a hacker could gain access to those credentials. If you're a member of ABA, the American Bar Association, I highly recommend going in, changing your login to their member site on the chance that your current credentials are the same as the credentials from the legacy system that were stolen. Also, make sure to be extra vigilant and on the lookout for any phishing emails claiming to be from the ABA, using information that they gathered and trying to get additional information from you. So just be aware of that. Another news headline. Attackers have been using an abandoned WordPress plugin in order to backdoor websites. They're using an outdated PHP plugin on WordPress, and through that are injecting these stealthy backdoors to websites. And these stealthy backdoors, even after a site has been re-cleaned, can be re-added if this plugin still exists. This was a very popular plugin, still widely deployed, despite not having any updates for over 10 years, which we consider abandonware, right? It's software that's still out there, you can still get it, but it's been abandoned by the developer, meaning there's no security updates, no maintenance being performed on it. I do recommend, if you have your own WordPress site for your business or even for personal use, make sure that it's properly secured, that the admin access is properly secured with SSL, with multi-factor authentication. Your site's up to date, and any old plugins such as this PHP plugin have been removed from the site. In addition, using a web application firewall can help prevent these type of attacks in the future. All right, now for our topic. We're talking about a little bit on compliance, right? Staying on top of compliance is how many companies can help prevent data breaches, just like the American Bar Associations that I just talked about from the news. According to Gartner, by the end of 2024, 75% of the global population will have its personal data covered under privacy regulations. Authorities, they enact new regulations for privacy all the time. A couple of examples, right? In 2023, Colorado, Utah, Connecticut, and Virginia are going to begin enforcing new data privacy statutes that they passed. Many of these standards, these compliance requirements carry very stiff penalties for a data breach. And if security was lacking, if you're not doing your due diligence in protecting the data, those fines can be even higher. I always get this name wrong, HIPAA, that stands for Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It uses a sliding scale. If you have a breach and you are a healthcare organization that needs to meet HIPAA regulations, you can be fined anywhere between $100 and $50,000 per breached record. Think about those numbers, right? So if you have in your system, let's just say you have 1,000 patients, right? Over the 7 years, you got to keep data records that get breached. if you don't have the proper security protocols in place, 50,000 times 1,000 records. I mean, we're talking a lot of money in these fines. They're very, very stiff penalties. The more negligent the company is, meaning the less security that is in place, then the higher the fine. Some steps, I do want to talk about some steps for how you can make sure that you're staying on top of your data privacy compliance, the regulations that you need to follow. The first thing, you've heard me say this before, when I'm talking about cybersecurity risk assessments and everything else, you gotta know what you know and know what you don't know, right? You got to identify things. And so the first step is identifying the regulations that you need to follow. Do you have a list of the different privacy rules that your organization falls under? And just some examples of these different types of regulations, right? Some industries like healthcare have regulations that they have to follow. So you need to look at your industry and say, okay, well, does my industry have any regulations or any compliance requirements? And don't just assume that the answer is no if you don't know about it. You need to do some research on that. Go and find out, ask professionals, because I talked about this recently as well, and we're doing webinars on this. The FTC compliance is applying now to a lot more organizations than it previously did. And I've talked with CPAs and other companies that fall within these industries that had no idea that there were these additional compliance regulations coming for them. So first step, look at your industry and find out what regulations your industry has requirements for. Next, you need to look at where you sell. An example of this is if you sell to the EU, then you have to meet GDPR regulations. Even if you don't live in the EU, if you just have clients and you're selling and shipping products to the EU, you still have to meet those requirements. Statewide, as I mentioned, right, there's 4 states that are having new regulations put in. California and New York enacted some last year. So look at your state and what regulations are there in the state. There even could be combinations of this, right? There could be statewide regulations for your industry. The example is the gaming industry, right? They've enacted some additional regulations around cybersecurity this year here in the state of Nevada. Also, you can look at your city or county. They may have some requirements, and then federal, right? If you work with the federal government, they have their own compliance requirements for government contractors. The next thing you need to do after you've identified these areas is you need to figure out how you're going to stay aware of updates to these regulations, right? They do change over time. Don't get blindsided by a rule change. You can stay on top of that by signing up for updates on the appropriate website. And you make sure you're looking for the official website for the compliance regulator, not a third party. For example, if you're in the healthcare field, go to the HIPAA website, HIPAA.gov, HIPAA.gov, and sign up for updates there. So that you're getting them direct from the source and aware of what's changing and not relying on some third party. And you should make sure you do this for each of the regulations that your business falls under. You should have your updates sent to more than one person too. So if one person overlooks it, you're going to get it. Typically your security officer or equal and another responsible party. Many regulations require, one of the first steps is to identify an individual within your organization that's going to own cybersecurity. Doesn't mean they're the cybersecurity specialist. That just means they're the one that's going to own making sure they're doing that. That's essentially the security officer or equal. That doesn't have to be their title. Many times that's the CEO, the president, the operations manager, somebody that has some responsibility that then takes the lead on those things. And by sending it to them and one additional party, it ensures that they don't get missed if somebody's on vacation and it's a critical update. The next thing I would recommend is doing an annual review of your data security standards. Companies are always evolving technology. So are the hackers, the criminals, right? They're always evolving their tactics. And it's important that you're making sure that as you're evolving your technology, you're evolving with the latest recommendations and compliance requirements to protect yourselves from all the latest innovations that the criminals are using as well. Make sure as you're deploying new equipment, right, new server, new computers, or any other change to your environment, that you're following and making sure that those devices are in compliance. Any change to your environment can mean falling out of compliance. A new employee adding a mobile device that is not properly protected could make you be out of compliance. A new cloud tool that an employee decides to use, a shadow IT, may cause you to be out of compliance. And so regularly auditing your systems and your practices will make sure that devices that maybe come online, changes that are made that are out of compliance can quickly be remedied. And it's important to do that at least annually. Depending on your organization, the size, you may want to do it more frequently than that, but annually at a minimum. Make sure that as you're reviewing your data security, align that with your data privacy compliance requirements, right? To make sure that you're still good in those areas. Also look at your audit your security policies, your procedures, right? Anything that aligns with this to make sure that, does the policy that we implemented last year still apply to the updated regulations and the current state of our environment? Any recovery procedures or implementation procedures or onboarding of new users, employees, devices, right? Do those still align with the compliance requirements? And make changes if necessary. Make sure that your policies and procedures are always up to date with those changes of regulations. And then, if you're going to update it and you don't tell your employees, guess what? Don't expect them to follow it, right? Anytime you update those policies and procedures, you need to make sure that you're letting your employees know, training them on that, and having them acknowledge those changes. That helps give them direction on how to handle things moving forward. Also, I did say make sure you're doing these annually. If you audited in January, your annual audit, and you find out in March, oh, guess what? In June, there's this new regulations coming for our industry. Well, guess what? That's another time to audit it again, right? Audit it anytime there's a regulation update to make sure that you're including those changes in your requirements, and then make sure you're updating your safeguards to align with those. When you're looking at your safeguards to make sure that you're aligning with compliance, there's a couple of different areas that you should look at and be aware of. There's the technical safeguards. This is systems, devices, software, etc. There's administrative safeguards, which is your policies, your manuals, your training, your procedures, etc. And then you have your physical safeguard, which is doors, keypads, building security, who has access to what physically. And so it's important that you look at those three areas and make sure they align with each other and align with the regulations and are up to date. And that the employees are aware of those policies and know what's going on, what they should do, how they should react and respond. If they're not aware, then you can't expect them to follow it, and there's a good chance you're going to have a breach as a result of that. Most breaches come from actions of internal users. Not intentional, but if they don't know what they're supposed to do and how to react and respond to things, there's a good chance that they're not going to respond the way you want them to. All of this helps to build your cybersecurity practice and build good cyber resilience within your organization. That's one of our goals, is to help make sure that businesses within Nevada and really anywhere that we can reach and help are improving their cybersecurity and aligning with your regulations and compliance. Not only is it good business sense, right, to help avoid those fines, but it's also good in the sense of you do not want to go through a breach, ransomware incident, or other things. I can guarantee right now, those that work at the American Bar Association that are dealing with the aftermath of this are wishing that they'd put better protocols in place to protect it. All right, with that being said, I do want to talk about upcoming webinar. We actually had a webinar yesterday, live webinar. This was our first one that did not require registration. We went live straight to our social media. We talked about insider threats. Insider threats are a growing concern, right? And yesterday we talked with Lindsay Hayes of Breach Secure Now on insider attacks and how to increase your cyber resilience. Really a lot of similarities to what we just talked about, right? Training your employees, making sure you have these programs in place so that they know how to react and respond to these type of threats. I'll drop a link in the chat where you can watch the replay of that. And then next month in May, our free educational live stream is going to be on May 18th, and we'll be discussing incident response with Sophos. So if you ever wondered, what happens when I have an incident? How do I respond? What should I be doing? Come and join us. It's going to be very, very educational. around how to do that. It's amazing as I go and talk to businesses how many of them don't have an incident response plan. So make sure that you join us next month, May 18th, to be able to learn more about that. I don't see any comments or questions on here. So if you do have any questions, you can always reach out to me directly through social media or through our website at itnet.works. Hope you have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks.